Okay, we are live. So hi, Scott. It's great to have you here. So I've had Scott Perez on my show several times over the past year or so, and it's he's a fascinating scientist. Has all sorts of patents. We're going to be talking a little bit about that, and he's someone who has a different view of COVID than a lot of us have had. And he doesn't go by the terrain theory, so you have to be prepared for that. And so, Scott, do you want to introduce yourself briefly? Okay, like because we have so many introductions of you on other videos, but just so you encapsulate maybe very succinctly what your background. I don't know if you want to just throw out all your diplomas or whatever the hell you want to talk about, but make it short so that we can dive into our topics.
Sure, sure. It's good to see you as well. So, my background, my undergraduate and graduate degrees are in chemistry and biology and biochemistry. Specifically, my doctoral work was in cancer and aging. I have a lot of industrial experience as well. Beyond that, I grew up a gamer in the
Okay, hold on,
80s.
hold on. Something's going on with the sound. I need to the hell is going on here?
Sure,
It's just it's gone real quiet. That's all. So hold on. Okay, go ahead again.
sure. I grew up as a gamer.
Yeah, it's still not loud enough. I don't know why. Output volume. Okay, let's try this. Go ahead.
I grew up as a gamer in the 1980s, in the era of Nintendo and Atari and all of that. So I started coding with Microsoft GW Basic, really the first computing language that was on PCs. And during my scholastic indoctrination, so to speak, I use these technologies to complete my work and get ahead. And then in graduate school, I built an NIH core facility for computing and science for publications and all kind of journals. Um, and I helped my colleagues at the University of Nebraska Lincoln get all these publications in Nature and Science and whatnot. So I then went into industry, I did work for CIA, Black Project Company. Then I went into the phone company. Of course, I've done work that had affiliation with the United States government, NSA, etc., including patents. One of which is on the wall right there that sent Ed Snowden out of the country. So I have a strong background in computing as well as chemistry and physics and math. And um, one thing I did learn is that pieces of paper are achievements, but in the real world, accomplishments are a harder thing and are of great value. So, the real world matters.
Okay, so um, let's talk a little bit about the COVID as you see it. All right, going back to ancient history, and so that people can kind of wrap their mind around the design of DNA from your perspective, and then how that factors in with COVID, et cetera. And then we'll kind of jump around from there.
Sure. A little segue. Dr. Tom Cech, the 1989 Nobel laureate, and Sidney Altman discovered RNA self splicing technology, which was the proposed mechanism for the creation of beings. Okay, RNA AI. Okay, Tom Cech was on my NIH committee when I did the cancer and research and aging. So these things started a long time ago and they've evolved for me. And so I think Dr. Ethan Taylor is somebody who recently was talking quite a bit about selenium as well as RNA origins of life and carbon-based system, right? So RNA is really the beginning of life, and then DNA AI code base evolved from that. So I look at DNA as an AI code base. Okay. I look at RNA as an AI code base. And they're digital and they're 4 bits. Okay. But they are mechanical and there's a lot of physics involved,
Okay.
unlike solid
Can you
state computers.
explain what you mean by that? Because people are not going to understand when you say DNA is digital. What do you mean?
Sure. Sure. So human computing technology as we know it, the solid state PCs that we're talking on right now are binary zeros and ones. And all of the math that is done in the electronics inside the computer system is based on 0 and 1. It's all binary math. So there are limitations in the number of calculations you can do. So way back when I started, things were 8-bit and 16-bit. Then we had 32-bit PCs. The ones that we're probably talking on are 64-bit PCs. Well, those have limitations of memory storage and computing. And when you
Yeah,
go to
but how does that
DNA,
relate to our bodies? Because, you're talking about a computer. So can you
yes.
talk about that interface?
So last time we talked about the 6 paradigm and I threw up a bunch of graphics and things from way back in 2014, 2013. Okay. So in our bodies are DNA digital. We are defined and engineered. Okay. And where does this come from? This comes from Genesis 1. Okay. When it's discussed there that things are created by their likeness. And when I first started thinking of this was in 2012 with Chuck Missler. But the truth is that DNA is 4 nucleotide bases. They're 4 molecules, but what they really represent are 4 bits: 0, 1, 2, and 3. And so now instead of just 2 bits, you've got 4 bits. Okay. And the complexity of the system is exponentially greater. Okay. And so
But you're talking about a translation, aren't you, between our body, the DNA in our body, and how it can be converted into zeros and ones, maybe on a computer. That doesn't mean our bodies are zeros and ones, does it? Or does it?
they're the product of 0, 1, 2, and 3. So in our
So you're saying
as
life
humans,
is a product of
in
this,
our code
not
base,
just our bodies, but life in general.
well, on the planet that we live on,
Mhm.
there's a DNA AI code base for all beings, plants and animals. So you see that in Genesis 1, or you see that in any of these religious scriptures, but also on tablets. Lots of discussions about creation. So we live in a we've talked about the hydrogen oxide system between the earth and the sun that is required for DNA AI code base beings. Okay. Then we talked about consciousness and metaphysics riding on top of those beings. But it is AI engineered because it here with the fossils and the information we have does not match with the probabilities of randomly occurring. And that's mathematical, simple thing. It's a simple formula. The
Okay,
simple math formula.
but aren't again, again, it's just because people,
Sure,
creationists and all
understood.
these
I don't want to
people.
go off a tangent. So we humans, okay, male and females, are defined by 23 chromosomes we get from our mother and 23 chromosomes we get from our father, right? Those are the DNA AI code base of us. They're our identity, their information stored about us. There, all the features of our face, a lot of our personalities, which is why family pictures, a lot of brothers and sisters might look alike, mothers and daughters and sons, or fathers and daughters and sons. That's why the identity carries across. There's no junk DNA. We are, in fact, our identity is stored in what my perception is in a patent that was filed in Verizon and purchased by a shady company. I think is a black company. Um, our identity, okay, is stored in these chromosomes, and these chromosomes are self-replicating processors. Okay, they hold information. They're the same thing as the CPUs in our PCs, okay, or the GPUs in the NVIDIA AI systems. They are the foundation with that code that holds all the information that is us, including the information for repair when we are damaged, and cuts, broken arms, all of that. It's engineered. So for me, I did not understand that back when I was doing DNA AI recombinant work back in the 90s, from 92 to 95 in cancer research. But I understand it more now because I've done a huge amount of computer work with AI that I created for surveillance and cybersecurity and participation in encryption for the United States military. So I had to see the other side and go deep and get a good, I didn't have a formal education in computing. I learned it myself and did gaming stuff. I had to go and do it professionally to that level to see the aspects of it. And then I had to be influenced with people like Chuck Missler and these other people to get different engineering perspectives, like from a mechanical engineering perspective, in order to put the pieces together to go back and solve problems. Because those people that were my mentors back in graduate school, they didn't have the foundation. They were heavy in biology, and they didn't have the foundation of physics or engineering to even see these things. And to be honest with you, at the time, humanity had not even evolved to the level of computing that we have today, with Zoom calls and social media and sharing of ideas. It had just started then. It was the beginning of the World Wide Web, really, back then. So I had to go in different directions and then come back to things that I did in the past to solve problems. Otherwise, I'm dead. I'm complete with COVID. I had long COVID. I'm completely dead. We're not even talking, Carrie. So, you
What do
know,
you mean by that? I don't what are you trying to say? You
I
mean
was suffocating to death.
if you didn't have some alternative like maybe the cure that you created in your, the Allison V thing? Or what are you talking about with COVID? You're dead.
Okay. So on July 15th, 2020, I was huffing albuterol every hour and I was suffocating to death from a virus that was in my body that was a recombinant virus. And my doctor, my primary physician with Harvard MD, didn't have a cure. Okay. He didn't have a cure and he did not understand what was happening to me, as many physicians with medical degrees did not. And so in hindsight, is 2020, we can look back and say, wow, what a shit show that was. Right? We can look back. So I lived through that, right? But if I would have continued going down that path without any technology to get me out of it, I'm dead because I suffocate to death. And this is what killed my grandmother on my father's side at age 39. She died of asthma. We now believe it's eosinophilic asthma. We believe it's a rare disease called eosinophilic and esophageal and gastrointestinal disease. And the coronavirus, the recombinant virus from a lab, it's a nanomachine. The code base is a nanomachine. Brought that out of my genome and expressed it. So, our identities, our eye color, hair color, skin color, all these things are features of our identity and genes, and we call these things alleles, right? Well, usually you have combinations of them. So when they express and the genes express, right, you get things like green eyes or blue eyes or brown eyes, depending on the code for that. Okay. And so then when you have male and female, they mate, they're sometimes you have a combination. and you have different eye color
Okay,
produced.
but when you're talking about this, okay, so you're saying in essence, you're saying humans are code based. Is that right?
Humans are DNA AI code-based design using chromosome technology. So
Okay. Okay, that's a
a
good
gray
sentence.
I understand the EBN and a gray, they have been dissected, and one was found with 16 plasmids. Now I can tell you and differentiate. It's easy. When you look at grays, they all look the same. You never
Okay,
see
and some people
grays with
might not
pink
know you're talking
hair.
about gray ETs, right?
Yes,
Okay, so go ahead.
extraterrestrials. Their code base is compact and efficient and does not have chromosomes. A plasmid doesn't degrade. Okay. It doesn't degrade like ours, but they also don't have different identities. So you can see that their design is much more of a clone based, but they don't have the problems that we have. So humans with chromosomes, the problems that we have are the end of chromosomes, and this is where my specialty is telomeres, right? It's called a biological clock. We age as the DNA divides, they shrink, and things happen like, hair color goes gray because those genes are at the end of the chromosome and they degrade first. And other things happen with genes that are near the end. Okay. In the case of cancer is an immortality condition where things go immortally. And so that immortal condition for us kills us because of our system's not designed for that, right? So I mean I'm trying not to go off too much on a tangent, but
Yeah,
my
no,
point
that's
is
kind of an interesting statement, though. I mean, if I understood cancer, it's more like it's a replication, like a overproduction of something. I'm not sure
I
what.
can I can explain that very easily. So
All
in
right.
normal cell division, these chromosomal ends called telomeres, they get shorter and shorter and shorter over time as you age. Okay. Until finally they get so short that the genes start degrading. All right. When the genes degrade, the human systems and the subsystems, they all start to fail. All right. And we die of old age. Okay. Hopefully. Okay. In cancer, what happens is, and um, really, Dr. Tisha DeLange, Rockefeller Institute discovered this in 1994, proved it. Okay. You have environmental condition. Okay. It can be many things. And what happens is the cell division, the normal cell division, it becomes dysfunctional. And either those cells die after 50 cell divisions, or a change occurs where the enzyme telomerase, which maintains the end of these chromosomes, becomes activated and maintains them in an immortal state. And now your cells can divide immortally forever as long as they have energy and nutrients.
But
That's
shouldn't
what
that be a
cancer
good
is.
thing?
No, because not for us, because what happens is the cells, right? They take from your body all your energy, mainly glucose, okay? But they will take all those energy pathways that your body as an AI being needs to function, they will steal it. And so you notice that cancer patients, when they're right before they die, they're usually very skinny because all the muscle tissue and the fats and whatnot have been converted to energy and the tumors have eaten it. Okay. It's like the dark side stealing from the light side in a metaphysical way, but that's what happens there. So, um,
Okay, but now let's get back to the COVID situation in the terms of environmental versus your version of what you call a virus. Now, I've been talking to other people as well that are saying, in essence, it's really a bacteria. That's what they say. Do you disagree with that? or because there's always this debate between two kinds of doctors, two kinds of
Sure.
scientists.
Sure.
One
Absolutely.
says one says environmental, the other one says this they call it a virus, but there's no such thing as a virus, really. It's just a name for something. So what is it? It's a pathogen, it's
Yeah.
a
Let's talk about that a little
bacteria.
bit. So I'm a realist and a scientist that believes on you need to have an open mind and collect information, but you need to keep an open mind, because what happens is when doors open for companies to do things, other things occur, right? So take a step back. All right. There's a paper that talks about coronavirus being 55 million years old and being seen in avian birds. It's avian, it came from birds 55 million years ago, right? That's a long time ago. The Bible is what, only 6,000 years old. So in my perspective, okay, I know there's a formula I mentioned. It's called the permutation of sequences. It's freshman calculus. Okay. It's the thing like you got a scrambled set of characters and there's a set number of combinations and they mean a word, right? And it's a puzzle, all right? Or a combination lock. There's a set number of combinations, but only one opens the lock. So with these machines, right? Coronavirus, I call a nanomachine. It's a pathogen. It's a nanomachine. It's not living, but it's self-replicating. It requires a host to do that, right? So do all retroviruses. So it's a 4-bit machine, okay? It's a 4-bit machine. Well, when you look at the code base, it's RNA. When you look at the code base of that, you look at the combination of those codes and you look at the probability of that sequence being that machine. Just like a rose's DNA is a rose, orange is an orange, or a human is a human. You look at the probabilities, okay? And this is what Missler taught me. When you look at those probabilities and then you rationalize based on fossils and historical information, you come to the conclusion that in the time period for existence, these things could not randomly form, like Tom Cech and Sidney Altman said, not on this planet. So the evidence on the planet where I go, okay, where I rationalize for Frank Drake, extraterrestrial, multi systems, habitable planets, and all the things that you like talking about, where I go there is based on probability and historical information. I come to the logical conclusion that these things were created. Okay, they were created as the tablets
Okay.
in the scripture say,
But it's a
but also
nanomachine. It's a nanomachine, you're saying. You're
right.
saying COVID's a
So
nanomachine that was created
yes,
millions of
ma'am.
years ago. Okay. So, and your premise is also that we are composed of, I don't know if you call it nanomachines or you just call it DNA or code. You said AI DNA code, right? That's how you formed it. So by the same token, it sounds like COVID is formed by nano, DNA. Is it DNA or DNA,
It's RNA and it
nanomachine?
reversed it. It once it
I mean, it
infects
comes from
you.
something. You said it comes from
Right,
birds, but why
right,
even say that? Why not just say it comes from the environment, or it's like a microbe, right? Like
right.
before there were
Because
birds. Like let's say before there were birds.
because the information that we have relative to historical studies on, we can take code base from a million years ago and analyze it from fossil, right?
Right? Yeah, right.
So the information that we have points towards an ancestry in birds, okay? But what these things are is software, Okay. So they've gotten dot releases either naturally through changes and mutations, or a scientist, and not necessarily human, in a laboratory doing recombinant work like I did. Okay. In comes Wuhan or wherever. Those are dot releases. Okay. And the agenda behind a dot release, I don't have knowledge about that. Okay. But I have the scientific skills to identify codes and sequence them. And those technologies evolve also with Moore's law, which is also part of the AI thing. So as computing power improves, the cost of doing that work goes down. When I was doing it way back in graduate school, it was radioactive materials. It was very expensive. Okay, but now cost has come way down with it
Okay, but
with the
what
AI
I don't
computer.
understand, I mean, is okay. Do you remember Cyrus Parsa? I can't
Yeah.
remember if you've heard my interviews
Yes, I
with
know who
him.
he is. You've interviewed him
Okay,
many times.
right. So he stressed that COVID, as it is currently, not back millions of years ago, but more recently,
Mhm.
that the gray AI basically communicating through computers actually to our scientists at places like Fort Detrick and other places, maybe over underground over in Ukraine, were communicating with the scientist a code, sending them the code that they could use to create this. I don't know if you call it a pathogen or what you would call it, but to create this thing we call COVID, right? With SARS, is it SARS 2 type thing?
SARS-CoV-2. So it is possible. Okay. It's possible and it's also probable. However, I will tell you that in my case, back in the 90s, what I was doing was I was using computer technology to do that very thing. And I was limited by the computers of that day. Today, I have back then, GenBank was on a VAX system, okay, operating system. It was on a DEC Alpha. Today, I can use a phone or a tablet or a laptop, and GenBank is on the internet and the web, and I can go out and use it. So GenBank has a suite of tools in it, and there's other software that you can buy that's professional, okay? And you design the code. You use wet laboratory methods, which are always improving too, as to do that. So that has improved, all right? So to say today that the supercomputers and the AI we have today as humans alone, forget about extraterrestrials yet, we should be able to do these things. And I believe that, and George Webb, my friend, has reported quite a bit on the supercomputers at Kennesaw, and we know there's a supercomputer on the lake there in Wuhan. I was doing that, so they are doing that, and that's called rational design. Okay, in the case of drugs, it's rational drug design, but rational design in the case of recombinant DNA, AI, or recombinant RNA work,
So
that
they
is done then.
created it in a it's you create it on a computer through coding, but then you actually
Mhm.
bring it into the real world and what created in a petri dish, or how does that work?
Well, there's several methods, but my point with the EBNs, or your point with Cyrus and whatnot, look, if the extraterrestrial component is there with their AI that's non-human, and the tablets created us, then what have they created? Are they the founders from 55 million years ago? Or are they the creators? Right? Are they the
Okay, but
creators, or they
let's
intervene
not no,
now?
let's drop that now, and let's,
Right.
now that we've established it,
Sure.
let's at least go to the place where,
Right.
okay,
So
so whether the code appears, it appears on a computer, whether it was created by our scientists
yep,
using these supercomputers, as you call them, which I don't know if you're talking about
right.
D-Wave or
Once you
something
create those
before
codes,
D-Wave, then they created in a computer. How do you get it into,
right,
into humans, aside from shooting it up
right,
because it was in our, it's, look, because we understand that it seems to be made up of two things majorly, and
right.
maybe a bunch of other little things, but nano graphene oxide and
Let's
spike
talk about that.
proteins. Okay.
Methods. Okay. They're methods. So method is just a technology that you use in a laboratory to accomplish your goal. Okay. Some of these methods, the way they work is that the recombinant DNA work is done in bacteria, right? With a plasmid. You
Okay.
code that out. Okay. The way you code that out is you have a clone that you've taken from the wild. Okay. And there are a bunch of methods, and there's a whole bunch of methods of adjusting that code. Okay. The methods that I used were PCR based, where I introduced code and removed code using synthetic code from an oligo. Okay. An oligo is just a piece of code that a machine synthesized. Okay. And then I insert it into that plasmid using PCR methods and cloning, right? That is just coding with the four bases, zero, one,
Okay.
two, and
So
three.
let me ask you this.
That's one method.
A
One
lot
method.
like, is that like the printers that we hear? Because
Yes.
I'm trying to make that jump
Yes.
between the
So
computer
we
and the
evolved from
material
right.
reality.
Right. We evolved from that method to what Elon Musk has with I want to print code out and I want to print. They're just polymers. Okay. And they're carrying digits instead of zeros and
What's a
ones.
polymer?
A polymer is something that is a molecule that is consisting of more than one. Poly means more than one. So it's N plus one. Right. So carbon, a chain of carbon is just a whole bunch of carbons. Okay. But in digital code, it's a chain of a whole bunch of zeros and ones. And binary in DNA, it's 0, 1, 2, and 3. It's just a chain, right? But
I
it's a
know, but it's just
sequence.
that it's hard to see the jump. I mean, maybe
Understand.
so
Understood.
so you make a code on a computer,
Yeah.
right?
In a
And then
computer, I would
somehow,
write it with my keyboard. I would write the code and then I'd use a compiler to create the zeros and ones, a binary language that the electronics can understand. In the wet
do you
methods in the
shoot it on the
laboratory.
thing like with frequency? How do you get it onto the little
Yeah, I'll explain it. So in a laboratory, I explained plasma methods. There are other methods by which I can infect viruses, such as lambda 5. And then I use lambda 5 and I infect HeLa cells, which is a human cell line, Calu, another human cell line, or I can infect yeast and these other platforms. All right. Now, once I get that code inside the system, okay, it will take the code, right? The code will be taken up and it will hijack the system, and the system will then manufacture the components I need, right? Like the virus components,
Okay,
and
what
it
is
will
the system?
manufacture them.
What do you mean by the system?
Okay, the system of the DNA system of that cell. If it's a human cell, it has 46 chromosomes. If it's yeast or something else, it has less chromosomes.
Okay, but I'm talking about how does the computer talk to this thing, these
Well,
cells?
you are the computer. Your cells are the computer. The computer is a DNA AI operating system.
Okay,
Instead of
but how does a
Windows,
computer make something that affects me? Through frequency? That's what I'm saying. It's something, it goes through the air when waves.
right.
How does it
Well,
do that?
those things are all in play relative to any atom, okay, on this planet. They're all in play
So is
relative to
it
any
based
atom.
on chaos theory somehow influencing mental, your mind affecting
Chaos is a
reality?
S in physics, it's entropy, and things are quantitatively defined relative to chaos via entropy in mathematics. Okay. But yes, okay, every atom has all the components of physics from all the dimensions, the ones that we humanly understand, the ones that we humanly don't understand. We've talked about that before. I I
So would you
agree
say
with
there's an
Shadeen,
element of this
15.
process that you don't understand? That it happens, it's like driving a car and not knowing how it works.
Okay.
Is there an
All of
element of that?
those all of those things are in play relative to technologies that can make changes,
Right.
right? All of them are in play. So if you are an advanced being that has an understanding of all the dimensions and capability of particle physics, you can manipulate atomic things at the atomic level, right? We talked about hydrogen.
But the energy that is done is from the mind. I would use my mind to do that.
That's metaphysical. That's what we call metaphysical, but it's the same thing to me. Your consciousness as a being has metaphysical
It's
capability.
energy, though. If we just talk about a being as energy, right?
It's E on the, yeah, we talked about that. It's E. So as a human being, the problem with the scientists, Tesla, Einstein, all these people, right? We got the formulas from them. They made these deductions the same way, but the simple equation equals MC squared. It's equilibrium condition. So E as human, when we say E, we quantify as energy. What the problem that we have with the lost knowledge or things that are been held back from knowing.
Right.
We are not able to define everything in E in terms of energy. Okay. So when we go and try to do our mathematics that are humans, we have a pretty good model for hydrogen, but what about the rest of the things on the human table, the periodic table? We're not good at it. We're not good at it. We can't even do it mathematically. Our computers, you know, are simulating to give us information because we can't do it perfectly. Okay. A higher order being might have the technology and the AI to do that and can leverage it. So, yes, all of the dimensions of physics are in play for every atom. Accessibility to leverage that and make change is a knowledge based thing, right?
But
Humanity, we're over here
these
tinkering with CERN.
scientists, I mean, I'm sort of extrapolating here, but
Right.
let's say you've got scientists in a lab and they get some information, but there can also be, I don't know if it's an energetic exchange from, say, let's say, well, on the one side would be the gray ETs or their AI. So their AI is actually spawned off of them, or maybe it even generated them, and so it comes before them. However, it works. But the thing I'm trying to say is that when the scientists are in, it's kind of like a group think. They are creating something together, right? So their minds are engaged, their computer code is engaged, right? They're
Mhm.
directing it, and somehow these cells respond, right?
Right. Well, environmental aspects in any of these systems are in play, but the way that we conventionally do it as humans is we have the organisms. Okay, the organism that we're using, right, the cell in the culture has a DNA AI operating system. We introduce that code in, it manufactures all these viruses. Okay, it manufactures them, and then the cells rupture and we
Are you
capture
just
them.
not able to tell me how that's done? I
No,
mean,
I'm telling you, we captured them. That's conventional. Now, okay, now beyond that and what you're talking about, okay, we capture that. Now, beyond that, what you're talking about, okay, it's a nanotechnology at that point. It's not a living
okay,
being, it's
all
not
right.
self replicating, it needs a host. Okay, now, what you're talking about is spectroscopy and spectral energy transfer from the dimensions in atoms in order to manipulate.
Okay,
Okay.
so is
Another
it
word,
light? Do you shine a light on it?
E. Well, then not necessarily light, but E. Let's just say
Okay,
E. So anything in E, it can be anything. These effects can be quantum and non-human understandable. These effects could be vibrational energy, rotational
okay.
energy, translational energy.
That's what I
Okay.
said, waves, right?
Right.
Waves.
Electromagnetic, but also there's electromagnetic, there's a whole spectrum. Electromagnetic, gravimetric, and then there's other spectrums that we have problems understanding, like quantum. We're trying to define the quantum spectrum now. That's what CERN's about. Okay, but what is beyond that? What is beyond that? So to understand human limitation is one thing. Now, Where the metaphysical comes in, okay, is our conscious being and the ability to interact with those spectrums and the energy there. So a gray ET has telepathy. That's an example. But yes, in terms
Well,
of
so do
can I
we.
use
Pilots are being taught how to fly airplanes without touching anything. They're doing it
yeah,
with their mind.
yeah,
They're interacting with, metal and instruments and all kind of things
yes.
using their mind to basically, but the things they're interacting with are of course more sensitive. They're made of sensitive materials, one would think,
Yes.
right?
We call that the brain computer interface. We talked a little bit about that before. Okay, so I had the NeuroSky brain computer interface from UC Berkeley, created by those folks over there with 3 EEG sensors and ASIC chip technology. And I was sitting back, interact. I wrote computer code, and I used a Bluetooth bridge to do things on the computer in the early era of BCI 1.0 with where the really the godfather of that from USC is Theodore Berger. So I've been involved with that. Okay. So I did that
Okay,
because
so let me throw something out at you. You're sort of like a DNA scientist. Why don't you change your own DNA so that you don't have this family thing that you have? Why don't you do
okay.
that?
All right, there's a book called Healing and Wholeness that I read senior year at Mercer, and it talks a lot about this very subject matter without the metaphysical aspects that I've learned since then. All right. So, first thing is, if you know healing is engineered, right? There's conscious things that you can do to affect that. One is the environmentals, what you eat. What you eat has a metaphysical impact on you energy wise from all those spectrums. That's one piece that is very easy. Anybody can do,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
I don't have to meditate wellness into my body. Okay. Now, I, like many other people, have my own way of meditation. Okay. And projecting self-healing or my inner eye use and projection and visualization of my own flaws. I'm a human, I'm flawed like
Okay,
everybody
so
else.
are you saying that you are doing this? You're trying to affect,
Yes,
in
ma'am.
essence,
Yes, of
heal
course.
yourself.
Of course.
But I was wondering why you don't try to do it in a lab like you're talking, where you manipulate DNA, and
Oh,
then
I
inject
believe
it
that's
to
done.
yourself.
I believe that's done. I mean, so I did a lot of meditation when I was doing DNA recombinant work. I did a lot of it because, and people talk about this, with Tesla and Einstein and whatnot. Part of my ability to succeed in these complex areas was to close my eyes and meditate about what was going on with aspect ratios I knew because I didn't have the computer technology that I needed. It wasn't available, it wasn't created yet. And I suspect, and from reading, I suspect, Tesla did this, Einstein did this because Einstein talks about his dreams. Some people can do it in the dream state. I have done it in dream state. I have done math
Yeah,
homework
yeah.
in a dream state. But I also I will share with you one of the things that I have done, okay, because we are multitasking beings, is driving down the road, either from other side of town or just traveling across country. Sometimes you're in a relaxed transcendental state.
Sure. Mhm.
And when you're relaxed like that, in particular, I can think about my work and I can relax and think about it consciously while I'm awake and do it that way versus people who have a place where they go and they meditate, whether that's a park or maybe it's a place in their house that they meditate. So I can do it that way, and I have done it that way. But I've done a lot of that from the office to home with computer code and binary systems. I used to do it with DNA systems way back then. It's possible now. And so if I see that, then I know a higher order being. a non-human entity with technology beyond us has all those tools in their toolbox.
Sure. But okay, let me give you an example. So I don't know if you know who Richard Bartlett is, but he has
Uh,
this thing called matrix energetics. And I
mm,
interviewed him several times many years ago. All right. And he has taught these classes. And one of the things he tells are the amazing things that happened in his own life. So one thing is that he has like repaired a broken leg. So he had a broken leg. He got on stage or something, fell off it or something, broke his leg, supposedly. You know, this is the story. And he's a really good guy. He's not a liar. Anyway,
okay.
and he had an audience. And he basically in his mind, he did a time travel thing to where he goes back before the incident happened and sort of configures it. And then his broken leg disappeared.
Wow.
And there's other things that he's done like that. Okay. So he it's kind of like inserting time travel into his healing process. Um, I did something like that once, and I actually don't know how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I fell down a set of stairs. I twisted my ankle. I couldn't walk on it. I had to be carried to my home, put on a bed, but I had some really miraculous thing happen. I couldn't walk. My it wasn't broken, but it was twisted, I guess, how are you, whatever you say like that. And I had a cat, my kitten jumped on the bed and something happened at that moment. I don't know what. And all of a sudden my ankle was fine, just like that. So what I'm trying to say about these incidents, I think a lot of people have some things like this.
I've heard of this.
And what it means, it's kind of like there's a slang saying that the unbearable lightness of being. See, we are frequency and light. You're saying we're DNA
All the
and
spectrum, all the spectrums of energy, I would say, all
yeah.
of them
so
are in
so
play.
I'm just
I
saying that
haven't,
if
I
we
haven't been able
want,
to.
we can operate within some of those exclusive areas if we are good at it, if we allow that ability to come in, right?
I
It,
haven't. I wouldn't say I've had that miraculous of a healing episode. I have done things to improve my healing, conscious focusing. That's what that book, Healing and Wholeness, is about, or at
mhm.
least taught me the ability to focus inward. For me, I'm focusing more on the technology aspects of the condition. They have helped me, but one of the things that I've learned from all of this is that there are things in plants that were engineered for us
Mhm.
in our entire DNA AI code base to help us, because these conditions that we experience, call them disease, illness, whatever, they are they're they're not normal for the operating system, and by using those things that are gifts to us, they help us to reestablish what's called homeostasis or normality in the DNA AI operating system that's us. So I focus on, I'll focus, my focus, metaphysical focus is on the actual molecule repair system at the enzymatic level. My focus, and asking for that, or in conjunction with the plant-based material, which I'm looking at now relative to diabetes. I'm that's one of the things I'm looking at, is this plant right here. So it's a Japanese plant, but
Okay.
I've learned that some of that metaphysical energy, or the metaphysics, it's improved, okay, by leveraging those things. That's how Alpha V came to be. I mean, it's part of that. It's very spiritual for me, because I went through 47 years of hell with these respiratory conditions, including raising a child that nearly killed me during that. Okay. But those aspects for me, okay, because I have a relationship with the science. Okay. I have a relationship. I have a metaphysical relationship with the science and things that I've done.
I
I've
understand, but
built
I
on that.
am asking you to think outside the box a little bit here,
Huh.
in the sense that, when we started this conversation, we're talking about like the origins of COVID and cancer and this and that, but that's in the physical, what we call the material realm. Okay.
Yes.
Now, if have you ever looked into the work of the Rife machine? It's not Wilhelm
Oh,
Reich.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I know Matthew
Rife.
Rife. I know I've
Okay.
talked to him. I know.
So
Okay, so I believe in
frequency
all
can
that
be,
stuff.
you can
I'm trained in all
dial in a certain frequency, and you can, again, you can affect so-called
right.
what we call disease or
That's
whatever
easy.
imbalances in your system. And that all you do is change this frequency dial, right?
Yes.
And and connect that also with your mind and with through meditation and so on. So
Absolutely.
Rife did this,
Yes,
and
he did.
they don't make these machines very easy to come by, and they actually, I know a Rife scientist healer person who can't stay in the United States because they'll try to kill her or put her in jail or something.
Well, I can send you
So
towards Matthew Ripe and the machines. He claims to be selling tons of them. It was his grandfather.
right,
So all of that, I'm trained in all that science. I understand it. Okay.
I understand that you
When
understand it,
we
but
just
what I'm
said that simple,
asking is,
yeah,
I'm just asking, because it enters into a different realm, because I was talking about how do you get it from the computer when you change DNA and you do this manipulation onto the cells, so to speak, or to inject it in a human, however it works. You know what I'm saying? And there's this other aspect of healing that actually
yes,
transcends that. So you don't need to be like mechanically manipulating even something on a computer. You can do it through going on to the other levels of reality, whether you
yes,
want to call it the astral
yeah,
or you want to call it the etheric, right? And so on. So what that says about us, okay, this is the interesting thing, is that it says that we are not just this nuts and bolts body, meat, piece of meat on, on bones. We are animated, but we are more than that. It's actually tells you that you can change your this interface, which we call the body. You can actually change it through interacting with these other realms, like Richard Bartlett does in his, you know,
sure.
removing time, the aspect of time and how we think about it. So a lot of
Mhm.
it has to do with the mind. So that requires that your mind is fluid enough to be willing to go back and entertain the idea that it happened a minute ago, but we can go back and reverse it.
Yes. Well, there are people that are gifted consciously, whether that came from their code base, which I believe it's part of the reason for Montauk and MK Ultra and all those things are they were looking for that code base before gene sequencing. Now there's supposedly 99 genes that aren't in GenBank, and vendors hiding and all these things. So for me, you don't have to convince me. The simple equation equals MC squared with equilibrium tells you that you can go back and forth between energy and matter, right? We talked a lot about that with hydrogen in that setup. If you are trained in those areas and you know that relative to those atoms, and okay, and you've seen different things where people have telepathy, remote viewing.
Yeah.
Okay, what is teleportation? It's moving energy to matter. Okay, I'm not saying I could not sit in the lab, or like Luc Montagnier that said he was sending transmissions and creating DNA in water. Okay, I'm not saying I don't have those skills. I did it conventionally, old school. Okay, my understanding of the math and the science and the appreciation for physics and reality tells you that there's a high probability that it can be done, and whether or not I don't I don't have I don't have full knowledge of whether that's something that every human can do or only certain humans with code base. I don't have that knowledge. I do have knowledge of, hey, I know some people over here that knew a bunch of MK Ultra people, like, James Martinez, Walter Bowen,
Yeah, right.
O'Leary and all that, or Andrew Bassaro and
Basiago, yes,
yeah,
who I interviewed. I know.
all
Okay,
of those
so but a
things.
lot of these, so it's kind of interesting, I don't know, I can't remember if I've ever put you in touch with Richard Allen Miller, the physicist, but he's also a Magus from the P2 Lodge, a top degree beyond 33-degree Magus, but he's a very unusual guy because he's not a black magician. Okay, he's not on the dark side. He uses it on the light. So, but he's also not very successful in his own life. So it's kind of, he knows the principles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about for I think he did this for NASA, and he's going to be on my show soon. I forget when. And it'd be great for you guys to talk if you haven't already.
Sure.
So, but the thing is that he says he has been tasked by them to send a group to Mars. I think it's Mars or to another planet. But he does it, he in a sense, he does it with their minds, you know, and it's a kind of quasi teleportation, but it's like that kind of thing where somehow the scientists at least are convinced that he's actually doing that, as opposed to, you know what I'm saying? Because there's this aspect of bilocation, and there's also remote viewing and remote influencing, but you can actually transport, your light body, basically that vehicle, from place to place. So these things that we're talking about a lot of times we're moving into a world in which manipulating with dots and zeros and ones, etc. We're actually going beyond that, right? And maybe quantum computing is
Yes.
trying to do that, right?
So in the case of quantum computing, where we are there is you've got a machine that's fast enough that can lay out all the combinations and then look at the probability of which one's the right one, right? And that solves complex problems.
Well, can I
Whereas,
ask you a weird question about that? Because I know about probabilities, and we did some investigation and had interviews about what's called looking glass, and you've heard of that, I'm sure, right?
yes, I
Looking
have.
glass. Okay, so but what looking glass often did, it had a readout on probability. That's how it worked, and it would tell the scientists or whoever in the deep state what the probability, and in many ways AI is still acting like that. It's still coming up with probabilities as opposed to saying it's going to be this or that, right? It gives you a probability, could be even 90%, right? But it's still a probability, right? So let me ask you something. When you say it's a probability, what if the probability is 90%, but for some reason that we haven't landed on yet, the 10% takes precedence over the 90%? Under what conditions would that occur? And if it does occur, why does it occur? Kind of turns this idea of
You're
probabilities on
talking
its
about a
head.
skewed statistical distribution. And okay, the reason that those things often happen is a generic term is an anomaly.
Yeah,
Okay. That's what people say. Oh, it's an anomaly in the
right.
system. But was it? Okay. So the things you were talking about a minute ago, I know someone had a girlfriend that was abducted and she was changed, you know, without surgery, mentally changed, you know, by these other non-human entities that she was abducted by. Okay. We were humans. We called it an anomaly. But was it the work of somebody else that made that 10% change? It looks like an anomaly to us, and we're like confused. but
Right.
it was just work of something else at a different level where we don't
Right.
comprehend it.
So exactly, something that we
Yes.
haven't taken into account is
Yes.
influencing, right? So it looks like 90-10, let's say, on some kind of, graph,
Yes.
but
Of course.
the 10 weighs more than the 90%. And it's because we would
Yeah.
say an anomaly, but it could be a series of anomalies, for example. It could be a series of things that we don't either know about, we don't see, we don't perceive, influences that we're not aware of.
Right.
So the
There's
readout,
another term. It's
what?
called dumb luck. So I'll give you an example of dumb luck. I mean, crazy dumb luck. So it's Alpha V.
All
I'll just give
right.
you a dumb luck thing.
Well,
These
or
distributions,
inspiration. I mean, we have a lot of words for it, right? The X factor,
right? We do. They're all human. The
God,
soliloquies and slang.
God, the spirit, God spoke, whatever the hell. No, but
Right.
what I'm saying is that it's kind of interesting to think about
It is.
because
Oh, absolutely.
it might be, even with the computers, you're saying a quantum computer, it can do the probabilities, right?
Yes, but where I am now, where I, in terms of my thinking or spiritually looking at the matrix, for lack of a better term, human word, I try to look at where I see these subtle manipulations going on because it's to your advantage to survive. Because we're living in, well, you guys talked
Absolutely.
about it last night with John Clyde. We're living in bizarre times, are we not? But
Right. And
if
Cliff
you have
High
an
is saying, let's just give
appreciation,
an example. This is a real world example. So Cliff High is saying his, web bot is come back with our psychic stuff that they then, put into a computer and figure
sure.
all out in terms of
Who, Cliff?
probabilities.
You're talking about
And
Cliff
he
High?
thinks his language of the bot is basically saying there's an excitability factor. Okay. So the excitability is going through the roof on the 15th of July. Okay,
Yes.
so everything goes along fine, fine, fine. And then all of a sudden, this huge spike, right? And the
Yeah.
spike comes down a little bit and then it keeps going up and it keeps going, he even said, to January of 2025. So
Interesting.
when you're looking at that, that again, that is, he's basing it on it's still a graph, it's still a probability, right? The high probability is the spike, right?
Yes. So I've met Cliff. I've had conversations with him.
Mm.
He worked on SS7. He worked in a phone company like me. He's done a bunch of software development. So we can talk to each other, although he has different perceptions on science, and I get it. I'm an open-minded person. So
I know, but
what
what
he's
I'm
doing
just
there,
using this as an example of a probability.
yes, yes.
Okay.
He's looking
Now,
at
why
statistical,
is that? Because even his bot is not, God. It only,
right.
it is only first of all, it only works on the internet. So
Yeah,
if you don't type something on an internet,
yeah.
in theory, maybe it isn't able to access it. And maybe a huge pool of humans or even non-humans right on the earth right now are thinking about something that never appears on his bot, right? Because it's not psychic, it's a
Yeah, I can talk about it.
machine.
It's a statistical distribution of behavioral aspects
Yeah.
of humanity, and whether those behavioral aspects of humanity are occurring at random or because of humanity alone or because of intervention by non-human beings, Cliff likes to call Elohim. Okay. It doesn't matter. Statistics are the way they are, and he's just measuring it. He has a measuring
Right.
stick. Okay.
But he's
And so
interpreting it
I
also.
agree with him, by the way, and how he does that is the right way because in my case, right, I had a blockchain program that was tracking every phone call in a global communication between SS7 and VoIP. So, before Bitcoin on the ledgers using the same technology, I agree with looking at these assessments. Okay. But he can't tell. Then we got Jeff Rentz's friend, what's his name? Remote viewing with the other guys from Future Forecasting
Yeah,
Group,
yeah,
Dick
yeah.
Algeier and those
Outlier.
people using their metaphysical capability to do the other. So
And
you know,
they're
all these
seeing,
are
they see a
technologies.
more materialization of this so-called spike.
Yes.
And they all, actually, all the viewers are seeing a lot of the same things, one of which
Yes.
has to do with some kind of UFO connection. But
Yeah.
he's also thinking there's a financial connection. He's also, so what I'm trying to say is that there are things outside the
Yes.
parameters that are
Yes.
not being considered in the model, right?
Absolutely. But I tell you, from my aspect, many times I will see the behaviors and I don't know, it's not like sight or your hearing, it's a feeling in
Yeah,
your consciousness.
right,
Call it metaphysical. I have those feelings. They drive me. Okay. They influence me. And
right.
I have been influenced, like your friend, the gentleman, he's in the Philippines.
The saying against all odds, for example.
Yeah,
It's what we're
sure. Phil
talking about.
Collins.
What?
It's one of my Phil Collins wrote "Against All Odds" a
Yeah.
song, and you know,
Yeah.
there's a movie and all
Yeah,
that,
it's one of my
racing down
favorite
Sunset
songs. Yeah.
Boulevard and the Ferraris.
Yeah. Okay, but what I'm saying is that's real. That's a real
Yeah,
phenomenon. In other words, we're
it is.
talking about, and there are, I don't know how to do it or anything, but there are enough statistical anomalies in life, in human, in the fact of our genome, you might say, right?
Yes, yes,
That maybe even rescue us from time to time from things that we think are, some diabolical certainty of a negative occurrence or whatever it's supposed to be, right? All against all odds, this happens.
yes,
Something
absolutely.
comes out of nowhere. And, I mean, I think that's the really cool stuff, right? That happens, right?
Sure, and I think in the case of humanity, where we are now, okay, because we've seen some really bad sides of humanity in the past 5 years, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think there are aspects of humanity that are metaphysical that can ask metaphysically, as a group, and Cliff can maybe measure it with this metadata, ask consciously for guidance and not just ask for guidance from a higher being, and not necessarily say the term God or say the term in the textbook, but ask for it, okay, and say, look, in my case, when I pray at night, I pray to higher power. And when I ask for these things myself, I'm just giving you an example. When I ask for these things, I ask for guidance from a higher power, but I ask with an understanding that I'm human, because I don't have all the facts. I don't know all the science. I know enough that I know that I'm human, and I also know that there's more than human out there. So, me and my perspective, yes, I've used metaphysical in laboratory. Yes, I use metaphysical to solve problems. I'd be a fool not to. Um, and yes, these things are possible because of the way energy and equations work. What happened, one of the things I wanted to talk to David Dare about, and I was happy to talk to David Dare about, right, is boundary conditions. We find ourselves in boundary conditions, right? Everything from the conventional, oh, you can't do that, it's illegal. Oh, no, that's bad for you. All these things. Well, then you got boundary conditions on the planet. But why are we having all these boundary conditions put on us? Like, for instance, when David Dare said, hey, this guy in space cut himself and he healed in 36 hours with something that would take several months to heal from a laceration. I believe that the way the code works better in a non-gravitational field. The DNA AI code base of the human operating system. I actually believe that. And I believe that as soon as they put a boundary on them, oh, no, you can't do any more of that, because the pyramid graffiti that's everywhere, okay, it's pyramid graffiti. It's a deeper thing in terms of what the DNA AI code base is and what control boundaries are. and what these systems are and how they're designed. And so they control you in a pyramid like down system, everything from your laws to your fiat currency to, religions. I mean, it's on and on and on. Everywhere you look, it's a stupid pyramid control. But wait a minute, why is it all over? Okay, it's all over our planet. Or there's one on Mars. How far does the graffiti go? And what does the graffiti mean relative to the spiritual aspects of those 15 dimensions of being and what we're in? I don't have all those answers. I ask questions, I ask for
Right.
guidance.
Okay. Well, fair enough. And I'm sure that everyone does, but I mean, thank you because it's been a very interesting discussion. I appreciate you're always, you have a very flexible mind and you're always willing to go at it with me back and forth and figure things out and kind of translate from your language, which kind of the language of science, into my language. But I think it's interesting you could call it the metaphysical or the spiritual aspect of all of this, because it seems to me that the better we get at manipulating genes and DNA and all that, and the closer, like someone like you who goes against the grain to some degree. I mean, I'm not sure you go against the grain in Black projects. Maybe they agree with you, but in the conventional reality, people don't want to believe that our DNA is just like zeros and ones, and that in some strange way it's AI. It's an artificial intelligent
Yeah,
system,
they have trouble with it.
artificially intelligent
And a
system.
lot of that has to do with the machine learning in our environment. So from the age, from when we're born to about 21, we're born with like 300 million neurons, and that environmental exposure to us affects us and what we're capable of doing mentally, in the physical dimension, but also metaphysical, right? So a lot of people, they weren't born with these gifts, they acquired them. They learned how to remote view. Geiger is a perfect example. These skills that I got, I wasn't born with them. Okay. The metaphysical pieces, I've told you, I've used them spiritually. I was not born with them. They were
Well, I think
learned,
that that's an interesting way of putting it. I'm not so sure that's true.
right? But some people
So
are born with them. Some
but
people
maybe
are.
you are, but maybe it's just dormant.
I don't have
Maybe
the
you
answer.
had the capabilities there so that you were
It's
born with
possible I
that.
don't have that knowledge.
You didn't have it at hand. It had to come in or be triggered from somewhere,
But
right?
I have an open mind, and because I have an open mind and I'm not in a box, I told you if you want to solve no, I told you once before, I told you if you really want to solve the complex problems, you can't stay in a box, you got to go outside of it.
Yeah, that's
That's
the way I think
true.
of it.
And so a lot of these problems that humanity has, okay, with the boundaries in David Dare, we're in these boundaries. And some people are taught so much to be in these boundaries that after they leave the indoctrination process, they never want to leave the boundaries.
Right.
And that where you see that, and I've seen it, and it's sad, Carrie. It's actually sad. Where I've seen it is in the institutions for education, because they, not necessarily because they're not brilliant people there, because there are a lot of brilliant people there, but because the system tells them they need dollars to do the work. And so then, because I went and did things with, for the lack of a better term, deep state or black projects or whatever you want to call it, there's no limitation there. The limitation is you and your brain and creativity. So once you've had these experiences, you can evolve, and then you can go and solve these problems using these things. And so yes, coronavirus is one of many, okay? One of many. And the solid state, I would call them more of a solid state type of thing with nano machines, whether it's carbon-based graphene or inorganic, all of those things, when the doors swing open, okay, when the doors swing open, the companies and the powers that be on the top of the pyramid, they swing open, they use it to their advantage in every way they can because
Sure.
they're in a control position.
Hmm.
So, you know, I'm open-minded, but in the other side of my training, I know the instruments to look at these phenomenon as far as human capability because I'm trained in that area. And so what it is, we use instruments, right? We design an instrument to look at the phenomena or to, like Cliff's using metadata. It's the same thing. I'm designing an instrument to look at, instead of metadata and behavior of humanity, I have an instrument. It looks at the metadata of the physics in the system. Okay. And then I use it to solve a problem. Okay. And then I take it maybe and then I inject it into humanity and I solve a bigger problem. And so when I was
Right.
suffocating Allison B, I didn't have time for a lot of data collection. I wish I did, but
But
that
but
that was
that
that was a
what I
lot of stuff.
think to some degree is that, our future is going to depend on the people who are able to break through these barriers and to think outside the box, in essence. And the ones that think in the box are just part of the foundation that holds us back. And a
Absolutely.
lot of a lot of previous, what you call previous knowledge that has been encapsulated or been, you know put into a foundation, or made like a religion, which is like a foundation, or education, an education method, and so on and so forth. In other words, these ideas that have come from our history even, and haven't been transformed, haven't had any, there's no breath, there's no in and out happening there. There's just a stayed situation and system. So the people that take that on, it's like putting a block of cement on your head. That's it. That's where you're going to think. You're going to think along those lines and no other lines, because that's what you have taken on. The rules and regulations, in essence, in a system. It's only by breaking those down and breaking through those that we're going to succeed, even as a being, as a race or a species, if you will.
Yes.
So I am very interested in that. And I think that there's this other side of it, which is these potentialities that come along with what we consider to be the enemy. So in this case, AI is at the moment kind of more or less morphing into what humans consider the enemy, right? That kind of thinking distances us from understanding AI on a deeper level, very possibly. And the way you talk about it is as if we're actually more or less AI ourselves, meaning
Yes, we
artificially
are.
designed, artificially intelligent. What does that mean? There's an outside source that is responsible for the way we're put together. The same way there's an outside source with any given AI system or AI being or whatever,
Yes.
right?
I feel like you get the feeling that you're being held at arm's length with these boundaries. All right. Just like David
Sure.
Aaron and the projects, the 5 projects he named, you feel like you're being held at arm's length. And then you see things like voter manipulation. I know quite a bit about that. Right. You see these things and you're like, you feel like something is being used against you and is holding you back, when in actual reality, the people that think outside of the box, that see these metaphysical aspects, that see these pieces of science, there's a book called The Grand Unification of Physics, and there's a preface to the book by Dr. Randy Mills, and it talks about how these scientists, Einstein, Tesla, they saw these things and they helped them to solve problems, and that's how they got the equations, and that's the value of the equations, because they didn't have any supercomputers or any of this stuff. You see it. You see it happening. The people outside the box that see these things happening, okay, are going to help us break through. But once we do break through, the question is, will we have fiat currencies? What is a fiat currency? What is the purpose of it? Because if you have the technologies to do the things and make the things that you need to live, doesn't our existence as DNA AI being change drastically? Okay, it changes drastically. Instead of now, we're not focusing on, I got to pay the light bill, I got to make some money to pay the dentist, or
Right. It's a
water bill, or whatever.
well, isn't it a quantitative system? They always want to count things. And the funny thing, well, this is kind of off topic, but the thing about the vote is they don't think they can count it. They can count money any day of the week and base it on that. They can, and your whole life is based on that. They have no problem counting that. They think they can count population, census and all this nonsense. I mean, they count all the time, but suddenly when it comes to votes, they can't count. They have no way to count. And they want to go back to the old fashioned method, which is paper ballots. They think that's safer or something, but that's absurd. It's as open to as many mistakes and manipulation and paying. What they do in Egypt is they come along, they vote, they actually get in line and vote in the old fashioned way, right? And hand a paper ballot. But before they get to the line, they are approached by whoever it is, and they are given money, another piece of paper, not a vote, but a piece of money. And they are said, mark this on that little piece of paper and we'll give you this money. And that's what they do. So they are manipulated.
It's sad where we are right now, considering where we could be and where we need to be. And with the DNA AI thing, and I told you, I mean, the biggest problem, one of the things, I mean, the reason I did all the hydrogen work was because of those valleys in California. Right now, there's a lot of problem with jobs and water in the area you live in the country. I know that area well. I grew up going out there on vacations a lot, working out there. But for me, I'm at my stage in life, I like to do things that are going to be generationally impacting. So before COVID and all that happened, I was working on the hydrogen stuff. We now have this fourth patent coming. But when I look at what's going on in Idaho and those farming areas,
Right.
I want, where we are with the fiat and the other holding us back, it's holding us back. And so we have to change our ways from this 2D farming stuff to leveraging the technology and the AI to do the work for us in a more efficient way with the resources that are available to us in order for future generations to survive. Otherwise, this behavior with the lying to each other about the voting or the laws or the court system or all this, it always comes back on us. Mm-hmm. Or even building these weapons. And my father was in the nuclear missile program with my father and uncle, with General MacArthur and Werner von Braun. You know this. Those things, okay, will hurt us and drive us backwards. And, we'll be cleaning the slate and starting again. We don't have to do these things. We don't. And yes, there are people with a cement block on their head, or the trank zombies, I like to call them, in Philadelphia, San Francisco now, what it is. They're a derivative of the dysfunctionality of the entire system. It's not just the voting. Voting is something we can fix. How do you fix the waves of the trank zombies on the street? and what it does to these cities and what it does to the communities in these cities. How do you fix those
Well,
problems?
but you can study the systems that have been impacting those
Yep.
beings, right? And usually you can actually find all of the systems that have impacted them all their
Yep.
lives and are still affecting them now. And a lot of them are quite negative. Okay. So
Yeah,
they had a disconnect somewhere, and that has become like that as is a chink in their armor, so to speak. And they were unable to get over it. So in many ways, the more we heal our system and ourselves, the more we
yes,
can heal others. And, it will, there's this thing about, the energy between us, the field, right? If it enters the field, it's going to keep working. It doesn't just stop because you stop, talking, right? Say, so we, like right now, we've created a field. It's a field of resonance with us and our listeners, right? And even when the
sure.
video goes out, it'll go on, right? And they'll be thinking, they'll continue to think along these lines or whatever lines they want to think. And then, but the idea of the field will have its own, a life, in a sense, a life of its own. And so there is this, that's a hopeful sign, I think.
It is.
And more people are talking. And this is why communication is so important, right? Open
Sure.
communication.
We've come a long way from 100 baud modems and bulletin board systems to Zoom calls and streams out to,
I mean, we're in a
as many
power
people
place
as
because
can
we're
connect.
connected, and we
Yeah.
know we're connected. Okay. And eventually a lot of that is becoming telepathic. It actually is. And that's impacting our world as well. And even the fact that you got Cliff High and reading a web bot who's reading us, who
Yeah.
then goes out and says, this is what he's seeing. Well, that's us he's seeing, right? So
Yeah.
if we look
He's
at
just seeing
that,
a
we
reflection
might
of our
actually
behavior.
cause it to change
Hmm.
between now and whatever the event is and impact it that way. You see what I'm saying? In other words,
Yes,
it's a
absolutely.
circular system. It started with us and it ends with us, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And you're gonna laugh. So there was a professor, his name was Dr. Albon. He was at Mercer, and he taught sociology. And a lot of students at the time, they always made fun of him, and they said he was drawing these circles and doing all these things. And the big game of life, that was one of the. It was a liberal arts school, so I had to take all these classes, right? And it was theological liberal arts school, so I had to take religious classes too. Anyway, the point is that it was Cliff High like in that the sociology and the things he was describing in society are responsible for these things, and they circle back a lot. So, maybe Cliff's measurement of the metadata and discussing it and using the connected social media capability of his network, his
Mhm.
social network, to communicate out to the masses can get people to think it through and somehow collectively metaphysically
It's a
keep us
feedback
from
loop.
nuking
It's a
ourselves to death.
feedback loop. Okay. So, yes, it feeds us back to ourselves. It's a
Yeah.
reflection. And reflection can be very worthwhile, it can be very helpful, as you can
Yes.
see where the issues are, and you can see where the, push comes to shove, so to speak, and so on and so forth. And you can rethink it, even, if you go to sleep tonight and everyone sleeps and has a different dream about the
Yeah.
future, it could change the future, right? So these things are all in play.
But it is a
Um,
double-edged sword because it can be used psychologically against you to take a jab.
right. But what I'm saying here
and
is that
and we've
no,
seen some
how
of
we
this.
think about stuff is how we are.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so and this is where we can impact our reality in a major way. Look, I gotta go. I got
Okay.
appointment,
It was wonderful
as I
speaking with you.
warned you before the show, but Thank you so much for talking with me, for going down these roads. I'm sure we didn't get to all the subjects we wanted to
We
cover.
could go on infinitely.
So hopefully we'll do it again. Okay. And thank
Yeah.
you, everyone. We had a good chat room going on here. I'm sorry we don't have time to take questions, but we'll do one where we do take your questions for Scott. Okay. And then
Sure. And if you want questions answered, just go find me on social media at Allison V, and you can ask whatever questions you want anytime I'm out there. I try not to get engaged with trolls. It's just no return on investment, and I have a limited time, but I'm a decent person, and I will have a normal conversation with you. And it's always a pleasure to talk with you, Carrie, and you have a wonderful day.
all right. Take care and thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.